So many desires, or as many desires, so many blankets. Covering the radiance of the Spirit. We have to uncover to discover. We have to uncover, discover. We have to uncover, discover.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Divine Discoveries podcast. We're excited to have you all joining us again for season 2, and we're going to be discussing a very, very intriguing and interesting topic that many of you have asked us to speak about, so I'm sure you guys are going to love it, and it's the topic of karma. So we have a lot to discuss, so I'll go ahead and do the prayers. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sadguru Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. Om Aim Saraswatye Swaha Om Shri Mahalakshmi Namaha Om Shri Mahakalikaye Namaha. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mokshi Yamamrutat Om Namah Shivaya. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Om Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Namo Narayanaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Pandurangaya. Om Apadam Apahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham Shri Rama Jai Rama Jai Jai Rama. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramarthanam Devaki Paramanandam Shri Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Thank you, everyone. Christiane, please let our audience know, if they don't already know, how to connect with us.
Absolutely. So as many of you know, we are on Facebook. Our page is simply Divine Discoveries. And we also have a dedicated Instagram page, which is divine_discoveries_108. We have our WhatsApp channel. You can find us if you search for Divine Discoveries. And our last way of connecting is through our email, divinediscoveries108@gmail.com. And I know we have asked for questions and comments. And also, if you have any reviews or any ratings that you want to give us, that would really help us out and help us get to know you better and what you're interested in. So thank you. Prat, do you want to introduce tonight's topic?
Yes. So as I said at the very beginning, we're going to be getting into this heavyweight term, which is actually a very small word in size, just 5 letters and 2 syllables, and it's karma, as I mentioned. But there's a lot packed into that. There's a lot of layers to it. So we're going to explore and unpack as much as we can, hopefully in a manner that's simple for all of you to understand, even though there's really nothing too simple about it. There's a lot of aspects and facets to it that we're going to discuss, and definitely excited to talk about it. So we need to understand, properly what this word karma means, because it's something that worldwide you hear the word karma used, sometimes incorrectly, probably very loosely used. It's in the vocabulary, so to speak, all around the world. So, if you actually want to talk about the origin of karma, right? Where does it come from? It's not a term that describes any sort of phenomenon that was recent. It's ancient. It's always relevant, every moment of everybody's life, whether they realize it or not. It came from the ancient scriptures known as the Vedas. We spoke about this in our one of our episodes where we talked about the Holy Scriptures last year. And, there's an actual usage of that word for a portion of those Vedic scriptures called Karmakand. So the Karmakand, if you guys remember, it's almost like 80% of what the Vedas contained. The Karmakand is basically what one can do to live a noble, good life, materially speaking. So there you have the usage of the word karma right there. And then within the Upanishads, like I said, the 20% where the real essence of what a human being should try to grasp comes in the Upanishads. And within those Upanishads, karma is spoken pretty extensively in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and the Usha Upanishad, which they both come from the Yajurved. And the other Upanishad where karma is spoken about is Chandogya Upanishad. That comes from the Samaved. And then, it's interesting. I was curious to know because I know that practically almost like a third of the Bhagavad Gita is dedicated to karma, right? Speaking about karma and then karma yoga. But if you actually go deep into looking into it, all 18 chapters either carry that word in some form or fashion or sort of reference to it. So that's an important thing for us to know. So, and then, we have a lot of unique ties into the term karma or the law of karma when we look at scientists, philosophers all around the world. For example, Newton's third law of motion. For every action or force in nature, there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? So that directly ties into karma, even though it doesn't use that word. And then we have phrases in the world, what goes around comes around. Everything happens for a reason. We still hear that, right? But it's very interesting how we say these things. At that moment, we say it with conviction. But many a time we're like saying, we also refute that by saying, we use the word luck or chance and all these other things. And that kind of is contradictory. So we need to understand a little more clearly which direction do we want to go. If you're saying both things, you're really contradicting what you believe. So I also want to touch on how the word karma has a largely negative view by most people. It's negative connotation, right? In the world that we're living in, we often hear, similar to what goes around comes around and all these other quotes that I just said, we hear that karma is an expletive. I don't have to say the word, but you guys know what I'm saying. Female dog. And, that's mainly because from a material standpoint, people who experience some sort of suffering or unpleasantness or things are not going their way, they're frustrated. They attribute that to their karma, and they say karma is this expletive because it's coming upon themselves, okay? But then there's also a positive material outlook to this as well. And that is when somebody else is suffering that you are particularly not too fond of, right? When we have people who hurt us in the past, and now they're getting their comeuppance, if you understand what that means that what they deserve is what they're getting, and you're aware that they're having to suffer their whatever it is for whatever the actions that they may have done in the past, or maybe you're personalizing it to you. From a vengeful standpoint, you get joy because that person who hurt you is now feeling that pain. So people look at karma, materially speaking, both positively and negatively, but largely negatively is what I've grasped. From a spiritual standpoint, right, there's also a positive and negative way to look at karma, right? From a positive standpoint, it means that it keeps everyone honest. So one has that faith that, okay, if there's a law of karma, it doesn't just apply only to me, it applies to every being in this world, every human being in this world, specifically speaking. So if it keeps everyone honest and accountable, then it makes you feel good that there's such a law that's taking care of business, and you don't have to necessarily do anything about that, right? Now, there's a negative way to look at it from a spiritual standpoint as well. Okay? And the negative part of it is that as long as, you continue to commit and accumulate karma, you're not going to get to the liberation state of moksha. It's plain and simple. As long as karma has to be worked out, you're basically punching your ticket to come back into this round of rebirth. So that is the negative aspect if you want to look at it from a spiritual standpoint. Because our spirit is bound by the karma, which keeps bringing us back and back over and over back into this world. So to kind of expand on that, I'd like to play one part of Guruji's video where he talks about karma, and there will be a second part played a little bit later on.
The word karma comes from the Sanskrit root kri, like K-R-I, just like kriya. It comes from the Sanskrit root kri, which means to do. So karma, in that context, means all that which we do, all that which we have done, all that which we are going to do. All these are included in the word karma. Now, karma means cause and the effect. Many a time, effects are seen, causes are invisible. That is called the predestined or predetermined karma. Effects are seen, we suffer or we enjoy. For that, somewhere in some life, there are seeds for that effect. In that context, really, cause is not separate from the effect, or effect is not separate from the cause, because that which you call effect will become the cause for many future effects. Therefore, the entire law of karma is called law of causation. Karma, therefore, implies past, present, and future of all that which we think, all that which we speak, all that which we act or do. The most intelligent part of this mysterious law is that it makes sense to you that why we suffer, why someone comes with a silver spoon and need not work all his life, and another works so hard and gets nothing or very little. And those who get little have such a digestive power, they can even digest stones which come in the rice. And those people who need not work at all, having very poor kidney or very poor digestive system, just smell the kitchen and the food and cannot eat. Those who say, no more children, my God, no more, they have twins next year. Those who try every other method and pray to every God of all religions still will not have children. So all these, so many millions of billions of such things in our daily life we see happening whether we want it or not. One thing is certain, no one wants to be unhappy. But I go round and round the world asking, how are you? The first answer is fine. And the next minute, they are going to open up a big Bible of problems. There is no one who has no problem. If there is no problem, that will be the biggest problem, because we have nothing to worry. Mind wants to worry all the time. And therefore, in this world of duality, with this little self which we constantly call as I am, distinguished from the capital S, the real self, this little self, as long as we cling to that ego, so long peace that passeth all understanding, immortality, bliss, and all these things are mere words. But the freedom comes the moment the little self is dissolved. The very moment when it is dissolved in the greater self, that very moment you have attained freedom. Freedom is from karma. Freedom is from ego. Freedom is from this duality, negativity, positive, etc., which are all clinging and working as long as there is this ego. As long as the ego is there, so long there is karma. As long there is ego, so long there will be birth, death cycle.
Okay, so as Guruji pretty much explained and defined the word karma and gave us a proper understanding of what it means. And just to say, put it in a simple word, it is action. But does the action necessarily mean only what you do physically with the body? What you actually get up and do? Or no, it's not. It's a trifold, phenomenon. Really what it is it's what you do from your mind, which is called manasa, right? In Sanskrit, it's called manas or manasa. Vacha, which means speech, the words you say. And karmana. Karmana means the actual physical action, what you do with your body, right? And your sense organs and your limbs and all that. So it's all a collective sum total of these things. But what most people don't understand is that they think that the karma is just what you physically do, but everything starts with the manas, with your mind, with the thinking and the different types of thoughts. And, it's interesting. I think more than the words we utter in a day or the amount of actions we do in a day, we have thousandfold thoughts, right? Thoughts come and go. Sometimes just something light thought comes and it goes away. I had this question actually myself, which is, do our thoughts really count as karma if we don't act on them, right? And it's a very, very, I think, practical question. Say we have 50,000 thoughts in a day, okay? I know that scientists have tried to study all these things and roughly given you a number of how many thoughts we have, and it's a lot in any given day. And amongst those thoughts, the ones that we allow our mind really to continue to repeatedly think about, those are the thoughts that we own, essentially, okay? Because our mind is driving us there, and we're saying, okay, I'll allow it to think about that. We're not pulling it away, or we're not trying to extinguish that thought. Whether it's a good or bad thought, that's secondary. But both apply here. And it's really when we repeatedly think of the same thing over and over and over that there's probably a chance that that's going to transform into your speech. That's going to come out through your physical action. So the power of thoughts is tremendous. And that's the reason why if you repeatedly think of something, good, bad, you're lusting after something, you're greedy for something, or you have negative thoughts towards somebody and you can't seem to get rid of that, and you don't want to get rid of that. Sometimes people are happy being with those thoughts. So those are thoughts you cannot escape the karma from. Those will fructify as karma. Okay? Now, when we categorize within that umbrella of karma, there are 4 different types or categories of karma. So let's take it from the past, okay? Now, we, in the dharmic faiths, believe that our soul has journeyed. Our Cosmic Creation and Time episode, we talked about how there are 8.4 million species that our scriptures tell us exist in this world, okay? 8.4 million. And that's just species of beings. within those species, there are so many different types, right? So we have to understand that the soul has been through that kind of a journey. And finally, we're in the crown of that evolution. We're human beings now. So if you think about it, we're right now in the sphere of karma. So there, as we also spoke about the creation, there's 7 realms above the earth, and then there are 7 realms below the earth. The earth is the only one where one can incur karma. There's no karmic reaction in any other realm except this one, this mortal world, this material world, or mrityu loka, or karma bhumi it's called also, right? So these 4 types of karma are sanchita. So I'll start with that one, which basically means it's the storehouse. And I was given this example in Chinmaya when I went there to Chinmaya Mission one of the days, and they said that think of it like a Costco warehouse where there's all this karma, mountains and mountains of karma that is stored there. And that is all the karma that you have not worked out yet. It's yet to be worked out. So all this karma, good or bad, doesn't matter, is stored in that warehouse, right? So that is called sanchita karma. Now, some portion of that karma is going to become your destiny for this lifetime. So a certain portion of it is then experienced in this life, and that's called prarabdha karma. That is 80% of what your life is about. Okay? It's what it was ready for fructification, if you will, or it was the ripened karma, which you can't avoid. It's completely unavoidable. It's predetermined or destiny, and we have to face that. And the remaining 20% is what we call free will. Okay? Now, we talk about free will as if we have nothing that's influencing us. But we've always had people who influence us from the time of birth. And what's more interesting is that because we are talking about rebirth, we are bringing our past tendencies that are latent in our subconscious, our fears, our anxieties, our desires, all of those are being brought over from another lifetime or several lifetimes. So I'd like to actually talk about these terms a little bit, like a cycle of how our karmas have been formed and how our psyche tends to want to gravitate towards doing certain types of karma. Because when we talk about free will, it sounds like, oh, I just want to do all the good things, all the right things right now. But then how come the karma that you're doing is still not 100% going in the right direction? Okay, you're aware that you want to do better, which is good. So you might get onto some sort of a practice or some sort of technique to help yourself get better. But then sometimes we will commit the types of karmas that we have in the past. So it's very difficult sometimes to break out of this, our own deep-rooted tendencies that we ourselves have cultivated. So there's a cycle in a circle type of fashion. So let's just say in some lifetime or another, maybe in your first human birth, there was something that you were attracted to doing and you did it. You thought, okay, or somebody talked to you and said, hey, try this out. Maybe it's try a drug. You never know, right? And you're like, I don't know if I should, but then you see these people having fun. So you try it. So you actually do the action. You smoke the joint, right? So that's called kriya. Okay, so the first is the act itself. Then the next thing is it leads to anubhav. And that anubhav means the experience of either positive, negative, or neutral feelings. So if it's something that turned you off, you probably won't go back to that. But if it's something that at that point you felt, hey, this made me feel pretty good, even though it may not actually be good for you, but it made you feel good in that moment. So that experience is enough for you to keep doing that. And that's called samskar. Samskar. In Sanskrit, it's called samskara. which means the impression that is made in the mind and it sinks into the subconscious mind. Okay? And that attraction to that act that you experience, it keeps coming back to you from your subconscious that, oh, when I did this, I had a good time. So then that becomes a tendency. It's called vasana. And that vasana means by repetition of the original act and repeated experience of the outcomes, a positive or negative habit of attraction, which is raga. So there's a Sanskrit word for attraction, which is raga. That means that's something you want to do more and more of because you're being pulled by that. You're attracted to it. And something that you want to avoid is called dvesha. So we, through our experiences, have formed these vasanas where we're attracted to something and we're turned off by something, right? So the stuff that turns us off, we want to avoid it like the plague. But the things that we're attracted to, we want to do more and more and more of it because we feel like pleasure's coming from that. So this vasana then leads to ichha. Ichha means desire. Desire is the nature which forms a component of our character. And then that leads to trishna. Trishna is the desire itself, when repeatedly indulged in, turn into deep-seated cravings and drives which then determine the way we act. It is an objectified desire which manifests as clutching and clinging to the desired object. The stronger the attachment, the greater the degree of suffering, or dukkha, which we experience. So this cycle just keeps going in that with these 6 steps. And speaking of the number 6, there are also 6 vices that our scriptures tell us about, that all human beings, and I'm sure other religions, I think, also make reference to these. It's kama, which is lust or desire, a strong desire. Krodha, which is anger. Lobha, which is greed. Moha, which is delusion due to attachment. Mada, which is arrogance or egotistic nature. And Matsarya, which is jealousy or envy. So these 6 qualities or vices, our mind sometimes drives us to feeling these emotions, and these vices are very much deeply ingrained in our psyche. And this is what leads to a lot of these vasanas being formed and the sanskars being formed. And really a lot of what the karmic reactions that we get is because of these things driving us towards acting a certain way, because we selfishly feel like this is the way that I'll be happy. It all really comes down to what we spoke about in our very first episode. What are we doing everything we're doing for? Happiness, right? If we didn't think it would make us feel good, we wouldn't do it. So there's that. And then we also have the 3 gunas that the Vedas speak about, and then the Bhagavad Gita speaks about, which is sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay? So tamasic nature is that of laziness. Guruji usually gives that example of, may somebody do the hard work and I want to enjoy the results of that. That's what a tamasic person thinks like. Very destructive nature, overly, as selfish as you can be. That's what tamasic nature is. Okay? That's one of the characteristics of this world. It's already implanted when this creation began. And then the other thing is the rajas, which is you work hard, you want to go and earn money, you want to be ambitious, you want to get name, fame, all that stuff, because so you can enjoy it. It's all about you. So there's still largely that selfish part of it. But Guruji says there is some combination of these sometimes. Like somebody is ambitious, but then they're also very noble in their thoughts. They're also sometimes very charitable. So there could be a rajasic person who could either be bending towards the tamasic side, which is the most sinful, or it could be the one who's bending towards the sattvic side, which is the one who's most tranquil, the most noble, the one who's pious, who thinks good for others, and who is always trying to be in a good positive spirit, radiate that positivity in the world with the people around them, right? So these 3 gunas also play on our mind, on our psyche. And so it's really a combination of a lot of these things that can affect that 20% of free will that we have. So Guruji says that free will is not really free. because our mind is still holding on to, clinging to what has made us happy. So the free will is not free will in the sense that we are unattached or detached from these things that we previously had attachment to. That's when the selflessness takes over, when the purity of mind happens, and we cleanse our heart and our mind through spiritual practices. That's when we are no longer subject to incurring karma. It's when we are dedicating our actions, or the good and bad of the day, as I said in some previous episode, where we say, okay, when you do a prayer, sincere prayer, offload whatever you have. Don't hold on to it. The more we hold on to it, the more that the karma comes upon you. If you have an issue with somebody else, that person may hold on to their end of it, or they may not. You don't know that. But as long as you hold on to it, the karmic reaction is coming to you. So that's what we need to understand very clearly. So the last aspect of it is called agami. Okay? Agami karma is immediate results of our present action. So whatever we're doing today, right? We know that we're setting up the path for our future. What kind of results? So just like Guruji said, cause and effect. This is the law of cause and effect. So what was the cause is now the effect that we're experiencing today, right? And what we're doing today is going to be the cause, and the effect will come to us in the future. So that future result, which is to be experienced within this very life, is called agami karma. So that means at some point in this life, you will get the reaction to that particular karma. So your karmic reaction can come in the same lifetime, just like we just spoke about agami karma, or it could be something that is stored in the warehouse, which was called sanchita karma. And when it's the right time in a particular birth, whenever you're meant to experience that warehouse will be emptied a little bit and then put into your destiny for that lifetime. So that's called, once again, prarabdha karma. So we have sanchita karma, the warehouse, which then some portion is taken out for what we must experience in this lifetime, called prarabdha. Then what we do right now as 20% free will within the construct of the prarabdha karma is called kriyamana karma. And then what we will experience in this very life from the actions that we commit now, or that we have committed in this lifetime, is called agami karma. So those are the 4 types of karma. So that brings us to the point of, how do we burn this karma? And when we say burn karma, we can't burn the prarabdha karma. That means the karma that's already predestined for this lifetime. We must experience it. But how do we, who have been incurring karma voluntarily or involuntarily, consciously or unconsciously, how do we save ourselves from the karmic bondage that is going to continue to bring us into another birth, into this world, which is getting darker and worse by the day? And we cannot expect really that it's going to get better suddenly, So when we understand that, sense of urgency should come to us that, hey, the destiny of our own destiny is in our hands. And this sanchita karma, this warehouse that's stored up with so much karma, is probably more than enough to give us another 100 lifetimes just to work it out. So it's not a good idea to keep this going, to keep adding more to that warehouse. Instead, we should do whatever we can to burn what's in that warehouse. That's called karma yoga. Once you bring that word yoga into it, yoga means unification with the divine. And what that means is, if you have a guru, you have God's grace right there. The guru will give you the opportunity and the advice necessary and the mantra necessary for you to practice meditation, japa, and he'll give you the sermons like Guruji did and so many other great gurus have done to help you burn that karma and close that warehouse altogether. And then from this point on, what happens is a purification of your psyche and cleansing yourself of these vasanas, these deep-rooted tendencies from lifetime after lifetime that's been following you. You're getting rid of those things. You're rooting them out. You're weeding them out, right? You're rooting out the weeds. And what are you sowing? Seeds for your betterment. Seeds of positivity, seeds of divinity, and this is what is going to help us get rid of all that stored up karma in Sanchita. And it will help purify your actions and give you a detached mindset. And then your actions themselves will be purified, and you won't have any selfish attachments to the results of those actions, as Krishna speaks about in the second chapter, which is karmanyavadikaraste, right? You have right to do the actions, but you don't have the right to the fruits of that action. Meaning, the fruits of the action will come to you, but if your concentration is on what is the end result going to be, what reward am I going to get, then perhaps your karma is not going to be very well done. You're not going to act with perfect concentration. And ultimately, once you become detached and selfless, you are even happy to share the results of your good karma, whatever good comes to you, whatever you gain from it. Perhaps you give it away to charities, or you share with somebody, even if it's just a meal or food or something. You open up your heart to the world. And that then leads to your liberation. Ultimately, that's what we want. We want liberation. We don't want to come back here. And if that's your goal, then you must understand that this sense of urgency should be there. But since I touched on karma yoga and how we can purify ourselves, I'm going to play the part 2 of Guruji's video now.
Truly speaking, it is not only human beings. Even the galaxies are bound and they want to be free. Everything in this whole universe, what you call the centrifugal and centripetal forces, are everywhere in the universe. You can call the whole world has lost its equilibrium somewhere. The moment that equilibrium is restored through mantra or meditation, right kind of tantra or kundalini, bhakti or loving devotion, jnana or introverted intellectual knowledge, through any one of these or these paths or the yogas, one is able to understand how we could be masters of works. Right now, we are all slaves of our works. As long as we are slaves to our works, so long there is no freedom. A 14-year-old boy sitting suddenly had an unmistakable fear of death. And the death came to the body and his body fell and there was no life. His mind in a few moments became numb and there are no thoughts. And he had a continuous awareness, a feeling separated from the dead body, separated from the dead mind, dissolved ego, a continuous stream of experience, feeling of the presence of I am that I am. In 20 minutes, he attained this kind of plenitude. He remained throughout life from the age of 14 until that period in 1950 when he entered into Mahasamadhi. He stood and stayed in the same state of consciousness. That is the state of consciousness through the Jnana Yoga Ramana Maharshi attained. There are only few as an example for that. Others have to go through another way called the Bhakti Yoga, through which they make the karma an offering to God. See, you should never think that these yogas are airtight compartments, because in the West, everything is labeled. So you say, are you a Bhakti Yogi? Are you a Karma Yogi? Are you a Jnana Yogi? This airtight compartment is not there. Ekam Sankyam cha Yogam cha. Yaha pashyati sapashyati. One who sees that one is the complementary to the other and not contradictory to one another. And all the jnana and the bhakti, all these should result later in karma yoga. Whether you are a jnana yogi, whether you are a bhakti yogi, tantra yogi, or any yogi, your hands have to coordinate with the head and the heart in doing this selfless service. And it is that selfless service which is known as karma yoga. For attainment of that selflessness, you need the light of the knowledge. For the attainment of sharing your joy with the entire humanity, you require the fuel of bhakti. If you don't have love in your heart, how can you serve? You cannot take care of your own self, let alone others. When there is abundant bhakti, that extraordinary universal love in you, then the more you serve, more you give, more the flow of that grace comes into you. Look at that little man, 80-pound weighing Gandhi. Where was the energy? Just imagine. We take so much time release vitamin, and still all the time we are tired. And those who have not learned this karma yoga, the secret of work as worship, the secret of life as a dedication, for them, every little thing is a burden. I don't know. I can't. It's impossible. I cannot take responsibility. Every little thing becomes a burden. And the moment you have love in your heart, you are feeling that I can drink the waters of the seven oceans. I can pluck out the Himalaya. Such form of energy comes into you. Now you imagine a reservoir of God's love for a Christ Jesus, for a prophet Moses, for a Buddha, for a Gandhi, and many others in all religions. There is no wonder they were able to accomplish and inspire an entire humanity for millions of years to come. Such was the energy of that universal love. And that is called the Karma Yoga.
All right. So as Guruji alluded to it, also spoke about the three distinct paths that the Bhagavad Gita prescribes to humanity, which is the yoga of knowledge, the yoga of devotion, and the yoga of selfless action. So these are the three major paths that we spoke about even in the last episode with Pramod Uncle, where we spoke about Bhagavad Gita and how these eventually will merge. So I like how he spoke about that as well. So Vikram, please enlighten us about how the other dharmic faiths or any other religion that you may have researched, how they view this concept and the law of karma.
Thank you, Pratt. I mean, it's fascinating how this particular concept of karma is similar across other faiths, but then there are also stark differences. So, in talking about this, I will first talk about some of the, I guess, more Asian oriented faiths, which are Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. And then I'll also briefly mention a little bit about the Abrahamic faiths. You know, looking first and foremost at Buddhism, I mean, it's fascinating. The way that Buddhism looks at karma is that it is something that is, you know, based on your own volition. So that's one part of it. It is intentional. It involves, you know, physical action. It involves the mind. It involves what you say. And this together determines the future consequences of what happens, as well as, what your destiny is. So it's not really looking at karma as, exactly fate alone or some sort of divine punishment, but it is more of a cause and an effect piece, So if there's actions that you take that are positive, then happiness will come, wholesomeness will come, good will come of that. Whereas anything that's unwholesome, anything that's negative, then and driven by some of the things you mentioned, Pratt, driven by hatred, driven by greed, that will lead to suffering. So, if we break it down, a little bit, as I mentioned, that intention is key in Buddhism when looking at karma. Then there's the piece of cause and effect. You don't get instant or immediate results from what you do. So it's not like you do something bad and right away, because of that bad thing, something immediately will happen. It's a drawn out process. So something you do today could come back and get you in 20 years. So that's another aspect here, or maybe even in a different lifetime. They also believe very much in that you are responsible for your karma. So it's not something that's preordained. You have your own will to do what you're doing. So you have free will to choose the positive or negative things that will drive the future, right? And it can take one of that to change exactly what's going to happen. So, very much like in Hinduism, you want to do all the right things so that you can break free of the cycle of birth and rebirth. And that's a lot of what is driven in Buddhism as well. If we go to Jainism, it's a little different. So in Jainism, it's viewed as a actual fine matter, as my research found, that is attached to the soul. So everything that you do, whether it's positive or negative, it attracts this matter. So if you're feeling anger, you're feeling greed, you're feeling pride, those things in particular attract more of this matter. So you have two types of karma in Jainism. So one is an extremely negative kind or a harming kind, where you have your soul, the soul has certain pure natural qualities, those get obscured by these negative things. And so the natural qualities are kind of their perception, your knowledge, your power, those get obscured. Then you have the non-harming karma, which determines how your physical body will be, how long your life will be, and how your life will play out. So this is two of the concepts that go within there. Now, how do you deal with this, right? So basically you can clean or cleanse your negative karma through being ethical, through being nonviolent, through having a sense of self-discipline. Okay. Basically, there's 3 jewels, as they call it, that can help you do this. So having the right conduct, having the right faith, knowledge. You can also eliminate any negative karma through fasting, meditation, and pure actions such as that. And like Buddhism, like Hinduism, good deeds create, merit or good karma, leading to better births, while bad ones, lead to worse circumstances. But you must let go of all of those to achieve liberation. So the soul alone is responsible for its destiny. And, by doing the right thing, you can remove those negative karmic particles and prevent new ones from attaching to your soul. So that's the Jainism view, which is very fascinating that it gives a physical component to it. And then looking at Sikhism is very much focused on cause and effect, Pratt, which what you spoke about. As you sow, so shall you reap. Now, karma operates under a concept in Sikhism known as hukum, or the divine order. It is seen by God, but it's not just an automated system that runs by itself. So basically, it's like the Lord is taking stock of what you are doing and what you are not doing, right? Now, in Sikhism, a big concept is divine grace. So while you take a lot of actions and take actions, there is a grace attached to it. So, you can, if you are devoted to God, you can burn away any of your sins or any a bad karma that you have done previously. And karma is not fatalistic, meaning you will always have the free will to improve and fix things that you've already done. With regard to the reincarnation piece, based on the accumulated karma that you have, your soul is born into different life forms, and of course, the goal is eventually to reunite with the divine. There's a big focus on your righteous duty, on seva, selfless service, to mitigate negative karma. So basically, karma determines your current situation, and utilize your life to connect with the divine through meditation, and you seek to break through from the cycle there as well. So looking at the South Asian faiths beside Hinduism, there, as you can see, there are some similarities and there are some differences as well. And just a real quick note about some of the Abrahamic faiths, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So karma is not really an explicit concept as it is in some of the other faiths. There's a focus on linear time and judgment. Basically, there's one life, which will be followed by a final day of judgment. So there's no redos or returns in a different body to fix things that you may have done wrong, right? You get your judgment at the end of this particular life. And, Christianity in particular, I believe, has the grace concept in it as well when it comes to the actions that you take in life. Because karma, it implies that, you're going to get what you deserve, but grace is, okay, this person did something wrong, so let's see if it can be forgiven and let them continue on and see if they can basically fix themselves, right? But at the same time, there is a belief in action and consequence. So the same thing as the as you sow, so shall you reap aspect. So whatever earthly actions you do, it does impact your standing before the divine and the afterlife, but it is not something that's automatic. If you look at Islam, one of the concepts there, is on the divine will piece. So, good and bad consequences are not automatic results of past actions, but are under the ultimate control and will of the divine there. So in that case, in the control of Allah, right? And reincarnation is not a part of these faiths. Karma is tied to reincarnation, but with the faiths here, it is more about you do right, you do wrong, and at the end of your life, judgment will be made.
Day.
Judgment day.
Yeah.
So that's really a taste of all these faiths and how they view karma. I don't know, Christiane, if I mischaracterized anything or missed anything, but
No, not at all. I think that was very fair and accurate for my understanding of all three of the Abrahamic faiths. I would say that in Judaism, there is a concept that's, I'm going to research it more and hopefully go into it in more depth here in the future. But it's basically, have you guys heard the expression measure for measure? So it's in the Hebrew Bible, it's in the Torah, it's called midah keneged midah. And basically it's a belief that God is going to deal with you measure for measure. Basically, your actions are going to bring consequences. Sort of, I think, Vikram, you were speaking of that in regards to Islam. I think it's very similar that good actions are going to lead from favorable. God is going to bestow grace upon you. Bad actions, sinful actions, you're going to face a punishment of some sort. And so there is very much kind of this notion, I would say, of a divine justice that is being meted out here by our personal God on some level. So I think that's very fair. And there is actually, at least in the Jewish framework, especially, well, it's not mainstream per se, it's not a mainstream tenet of the Jewish theology. I would say there absolutely is the idea of reincarnation of souls, in especially in like Kabbalah, more mystical strains of thought. It's very much in the theology that, you know, there is this idea of transmigration, reincarnation. Our souls do come back, and our actions in one life can affect future lives. So that is something that's sort of interesting to note.
Thanks for mentioning that, Christiane, because I was going to ask you that. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I think, honestly, at the onset of any of these religions, they probably had that belief in reincarnation. It probably got thrown out at some point by people who didn't want to allow people to really believe that that was the case, you know?
Probably the power
Yeah.
plays, right, that can happen within organized religion, right? But if you really dig through the text, like, it's still there.
Absolutely. Because
Yep.
if you're saying God is all merciful, if you really think about it, they would just only give you one shot at it and just decide, okay, this soul is going to be a human, this soul is going to be a deer, and this soul is going to be something else. And that's all there is to that soul. There's no opportunity for, you know, so from a logical standpoint, it doesn't really make sense. But
Yeah, I agree, Pratt. I mean, I think, you know, I also find it a little hard to believe that, let's say someone is inherently evil in a particular life. I mean, does that mean that that soul is always evil?
right.
Or it's just that the circumstances of that particular life made them be that way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to me that someone is just completely evil or forever, you know.
And they don't get a chance for redemption. You know,
Yeah.
in the world we're living in, we give people second, third, fourth, fifth chances. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
actually, if you think about it, in the world we live in, laws are there, but how they're enforced, you never know, right? People can get framed for murders they never committed, or somebody, you know, who's guilty is scot-free. So in this world, I feel like the justice system can be all over the place, you know? But the law of karma is infallible, as Guruji would say. It, no matter where you run off to, its arms are long enough to reach you. So you're going to be held accountable for everything.
You talk about the long arm of the law. Pratt's talking about the long arm of karma.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, you know, a few things that you mentioned, Vikram, about the other dharmic fates that I'd like to actually mention that, you know, it slipped my mind to mention it, but how you talked about how your birth and who you're born to, which family and what species and all that is determined by your karma, right? From your past. So, you know, what kind of family you're born into. You could be born into a really pious family, or it could be God knows what kind of, you know, all kinds of circumstances that you hear about these days. So we have to count, you know, our blessings that, you know, we're born human. We have this opportunity for liberation, and our karmas have given us good families to be born into. Okay. And as you alluded to, how even our physical appearance is, you know, or sometimes weaknesses within the body is also karmically decided. You know, certain parts of your body is not functioning the way somebody else's normally functions. Yours is abnormal. You know, there was that was the karmic reaction, you know. So there's really nobody to blame in this whole thing. You know, while people do want to blame when things don't go right, you're really ultimately responsible for whatever happens to you. And one more thing I wanted to say is, some people might have that question, okay, if I do a lot of good things, will that neutralize or nullify my bad my sinful acts? Will my bad karma be negated or burned by my good karma? The answer is no, because they both create bondage. So even if you're a very good human being, unless your karma is purified to the point where you're basically selfless, detached, and you're offering your karmas, essentially you're devotionally tied to the divine, and that's what is, you're just working with that with the power of the divine. Unless you're that, the good, even if you're 95% good in your lifetime and 5% bad, or whatever you want to say, whatever percentage you want to do, even the good karma is good enough to bring you back here. So there's no release from the bondage of karma until you turn towards the divine and then begin that process of purification, and then have your actions, speech, and mental thoughts all be sort of driven in that direction. That's when you know the divine is sort of operating through you, and you can not do anything at that point to really harm yourself or harm anybody else, So that was some great points and a lot of similarities between these faiths. So thank you for that, Vikram. Christiane, did you have any karma-related questions?
You've hit on so many of the things that I was going to ask about. Oh, here's one. You were talking about how, we're fortunate enough to be born human. So I understand animals cannot obtain liberation, but are they accumulating karma?
Yeah, my understanding is that animals are not subject to karma at all because, like you said, they have very limited consciousness, and their basic, objective is to survive, find something to eat, reproduce, just go about their day, and then defend themselves if there's any sort of an attack on them, right? That's really all that they do. And that consciousness is, of course, like you said, it evolves, but I think whether it's an insect or whether it's a mammal or reptile or whatever, that basic objective, or those 3 or 4 objectives, is basically what they live by. They can't really they play a role, don't get me wrong, and they do have the souls. And like I said, 8.4 million species, that means that we all have journeyed. If we're today human, that means we have been through those lifetimes already. We have been in those kind of bodies already. We have served that kind of a role for nature. And I'm not trying to take away anything in terms of their importance. That's what I'm saying. They all have an important role to play. If we didn't have bees, we wouldn't have honey, right? And because of honey, it's a natural remedy for chest infection. And we utilize these things that other beings are producing for us, right? So they all play an important role, and they're sort of programmed with the abilities to do those things when they're in those bodies. But those same souls are moving up in the evolutionary scheme, and it's really the human being that can make a major impact positively or negatively in the world, right? So that's why we're called the crown of that evolution. And hence our actions are held to judgment more than, that of an animal, because they're just doing whatever basic necessities they have to carry out for their life, for their livelihood and their survival. Now, having said that, what I do want to say is that one who is a human being can do types of karma that pushes them back in this, it regresses. They regress in the process of species evolution. We're not going from human being to liberation. We're going from human being to some sort of animal species again. We're going backwards. And that can happen also based on what our karmas, define in terms of what the result of those karmas will be. If we're a very heinous person who's ruthless, who has no heart, you're animalistic.
Yeah. I mean, I would say this might be a very morbid example, but if there's someone that is like a cannibal, I would see them being born as a lion in their next life. That's a very weird example, but
Great example. It makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So there's no guarantee that you're a human being now. You're going to only become a human being later if you have another birth. So the idea should be to not have another birth. And if you are going to have another birth, do as much positive so that you kind of inch your way, at least do some percentage of the journey of reaching to God. And then you get the next birth is sort of helping you out. God is giving you a bridge so that you can continue on that path. So if you do good, that's always the better thing than any bad negative karma that you incur. That's for sure.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Talking about doing good, can you talk a little bit about maybe the relationship between karma and dharma? Like if you're faithful to your dharma, are you going to accumulate good karma? Or is that not enough? Do you need to have the karma yoga and really expand upon, is dharma not going to get you there alone?
Pat, may I?
Does that make sense?
Please do.
Yeah. So it's a little tricky in my personal view. So we talked about dharma. Dharma is one's duty, right? Now, it depends on how one views what one's duty is, right? So someone like a really bad person, they could think like, oh, my duty, my dharma is to kill people, right? That's what they think. And so the karma that they do, based on what they view their dharma is to harm people. So obviously that's not a good thing. So I think the challenge is that karma, there's a clear sense of, for the most part, there's a clear sense of kind of what is right and what is wrong. But with dharma, the main thing is duty. But what do you view your duty to be? That's what I think is the complication here.
Right.
I don't know, Brad, if you look at it similarly, but
yeah, I do. I would say if your dharma is driven towards the good of humanity, the greater good, right? If that's what your idea is, and that's what you feel your duty is, and you're driven towards that type of dharma, then your karma is already karma yoga, right? Because you're doing something to help others. You're doing something for the benefit of others. If you're doing something for the benefit of yourself only, in that sense, if somebody thinks that terrorizing the world by killing people is their dharma, then I'm sorry, there's no good karma there coming out of that for sure. So that's why, so I hope that answers your question, Christiane.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think in the example of like someone thinking killing people is their dharma, I think they're incorrect in what their dharma is. They're not really doing their dharma. They might think they are, but they're not. But if you're actually doing your dharma, which is what the time you're in, your circumstances that we find ourselves in, if you're actually really faithful to that dharma, then like that makes a lot of sense, Pratt. You are in a sense doing karma yoga.
Yes.
So I think they're pretty like intimately connected from what my understanding is.
But the key thing is the intention is what matters, right? The intent. Because in many scriptures and our Puranas and even our Mahabharat and stuff, we have Bhagavad Gita, God has alluded that it's really what's in your mind, what's in your heart, what's inside going on within you is what really matters to me. Even if you don't act out something bad, you don't harm anybody physically. Inside, if you're thinking negatively about that person, or inside your mind, you're attacking that person physically, but you're actually not doing it in real life, that's still as bad, sometimes even worse, right? Because mentally, you're contemplating on the idea of harming somebody. So if your intention, just based from the thought process, is not good, then that bad karma is definitely coming from that. So intention is of paramount importance.
So, and then it could be the opposite. Like you could have really great, pure intentions, but your actions might not be so great. So hopefully, I would hope that God would judge you favorably in that situation.
Sure. I mean, I think if you have pure intentions, then generally you're probably not going to do something egregiously bad. You might do something unintentionally, but as long as you will realize quickly, trust me. If you are on that path of purification, you will realize that, hey, I slipped up, and you seek forgiveness. One of the things that Vikram mentioned about the Abrahamic faiths, which I'd like to just highlight here, is that, there's this concept of confession, right? At least you are owning up to the fact that you have messed up somewhere or you've done something wrong, and you're coming to the church or coming to the mosque or whatever and talking to the leader at that particular church, and you're speaking to them and confessing what you've done wrong. Now, after that confession, if you decide, okay, I've been forgiven, you're telling yourself you've been forgiven, and then you go right back and do the same thing again, that means you haven't learned anything from that. That's again what we call the vasanas, the tendencies. And you're just trying to make a mental excuse for yourself that, every time I screw up, I'm going to go and get forgiveness from God. You're not showing any progress there. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're accumulating karma every day, all the time, in our minds and our thoughts, etc. And sometimes it plays out soon in this life, right?
Agami.
We don't need to. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
But the thing is, like I said, just imagine if you think about 50,000, 60,000 thoughts in a day, if all of those led to individual karma, to our karmic bank account, sanchita karma, imagine how much we would have. I don't think that's true. Like I said earlier, it's the ones that your mind is constantly dwelling on. What your mind wants to hold on to, those thoughts that repeatedly come to you, you're not able to dispel them. Those are the ones that will lead to karmic reaction for you. That is the karma you're accumulating. If it's a thought that comes to you, so many thoughts come to us, good and bad. If they float away, if you find a way to allow them to float away, then you're fine. It's what you're holding on to that you have to take ownership for. So we're not accumulating 50,000 thoughts worth of karma a day. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There's hope.
Okay,
but how do we prevent ourselves from even holding and clinging on to the ones that we will incur karma for, right? That's the key. Is why do we don't want to hold on to these things, right? We don't want to hold on to the negatives or the positives, because the positives are going to lead to ego making us feel like we're great, best things in sliced bread, and the negatives are going to only take us down. So why do we want to deal with that, right? So it's that surrendering of both, which is the art that we need to learn through spiritual practices. Now, I do want to mention this, that karma can be committed individually. So, of course, you can be held accountable for what you did. You may have partnered with somebody to do something, good or bad. Rob a bank. You didn't do it alone. You did it with some other people. So collectively, you are going to incur karma. Then you can even think of it from a national perspective. Countries can incur karma internationally as well. So it's good to be aware of these things.
Very nice. Thank you, Prat. I don't really have any more questions now. Do you?
Vikram, I would like you to actually, since you're such a great storyteller, if you don't mind, let us know about some karma-related stories, that touched you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, so I'll try to be succinct in what I share. But I think for me, when I think about karma and in its many forms that you mentioned, Prat, the Mahabharat is a great example of this. We've talked a little bit about Mahabharat in the past, which is, for those listeners that are not familiar, the Mahabharat is one of the two main Hindu Indian epics that not only tell a magnificent story, but they serve as the foundation of some of the core ideals that we've been talking about in our different episodes: dharma, karma, right and wrong, how one should behave, good, evil, divinity, all those things, right? So in the Mahabharat, what is most fascinating is how, you know, certain characters take certain actions and things don't happen immediately, but it lays the foundation of something that will happen in the future that is necessary for the story to reach the conclusion that it needs to. So Mahabharat, the foundation of the story is the war of good versus evil, right? So this is a war that involved the best warriors of the time, on both sides. Even on the bad side, the god of side, right? There were warriors that were unparalleled and unmatched. On the Pandav side, which is the good side, the good dharma side, there were warriors that were unmatched. One character who really faced a lot of consequences due to his karma was the character of Karna. Now, there are some spoilers here, so I apologize to our listeners, but they have to be mentioned to understand this concept. So I mentioned the Pandavas, right? The Pandavas were 5 brothers, right? And the story is basically a tussle between 2 sets of cousins, the Pandavas and Kauravas, fighting for a kingdom. The Pandavas had a right to the kingdom, which the Kauravas did not relinquish, and that was the cause of the war. Amidst all this, the Pandav's mother is a woman named Kunti. Kunti is also the aunt of Lord Krishna, who we've spoken about. Lord Krishna's father and Kunti were a brother and sister. So basically, prior to her marriage to King Pandu, due to various circumstances, she had given birth to a son, Karn, but because she was unwedded, she abandoned the child out of fear of, public perception and whatnot. So the child, who was actually born a warrior, he grew up in a charioteer, at a charioteer's home, who found him, and they didn't have any children, so they raised him. And so throughout his life, he faced lots of insults and pain because he had the not the mental capacity, but it was within him that I'm a warrior. But he wasn't growing up in that, so no one took him seriously, right? But anyway, he was the son of the sun god. So he was, in some ways, a divine child. He was born with a divine armor that was attached to his body, as well as these shining earrings, which protected him as well. But anyway, what happens is he becomes friends with the chief antagonist of the story, which is Duryodhan, the Pandav's cousin, right? And so Karn decides to fight on Duryodhan's side, obviously, against the Pandavas. But throughout this time, Karn knows in the back of his mind that his friend, Duryodhan, is wrong. But out of a feeling of obligation to the one person who's given him so much respect and friendship and all that, he sticks with him. But so anyway, a little bit about Karn. So, and where the karma piece comes. So Karn couldn't get an education on warfare with any conventional guru, because a lot of conventional gurus only took people born in the Kshatriya caste, or the warrior caste, which is princes and kings and all that. So Karn went and he learned the art of warfare from Guru Parshurama, which is also one of the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. Guru Parshurama did not like the warriors or warrior caste, so he took students that were not of that caste, right? So, he taught Karna everything he knew. One day, Guru Parshurama took a nap on Karna's leg or thigh, and all of a sudden a spider came and he went onto Karna's leg and bit him and kept biting him and kept biting him and kept biting him. And Karna did not want to disturb Guru Parshurama's sleep, so he just took the pain. Then Guru Parashurama woke up and he saw this blood flowing from Karna's leg, thigh, and he's like, wait, what's going on? How can you have taken this pain? This is something that only warriors do. Any other caste does not have the ability to tolerate pain. So you have lied to me. You are actually a warrior. You are not some other. Garden said, no, no, no. I'm not a warrior. I didn't want to disturb your sleep. But Guru Parshrama was furious. So he cursed Garden that you took knowledge from me by lying to me. So when you need knowledge the most, you will not remember it. Okay? So remember this, folks. This is one thing that happened. Secondly, Garn, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but Garn ended up killing a cow. Okay? Now, the farmer came and he saw his dead cow and he was livid. He said that you killed a really innocent creature, a helpless creature. So when you die, you're going to be helpless. Okay? So these two things happened. Then, third, Garn was known as being a very charitable man. And there was a particular time of the day where if you went to him and asked him for something, anything at all, he would give it to you. His chief rival was Arjuna, who incidentally was also his brother. And, you know, both of them had the competition as who's the best archer, right? So Arjuna was also a divine child. He was born by the grace of Indra, right?
King
so
of the
Indra was,
demigods.
yeah, king of the demigods. So Indra was nervous as to what would happen in this war. So he decided to go to Karna and at that time and ask Karna for the armor that he was born with because he knew that Karna would not refuse. So the sun god, whom Karna was born from, went to him and said, hey, just giving you warning that today Indra's going to come and ask you for this stuff. So don't give it to him. Karna said, well, okay, but whenever someone asks me, I have to give it to him. That's my rule. So he said, okay, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But then in return, ask for a weapon called Shakti. Okay? So that time comes, Karna recognizes Indra, who's come in disguise. And true to his word, he peels off his armor that he was born with and he takes off his earrings, divine earrings, and he gives them to Indra, right? And Indra in return gives him the Shakti. Flash forward to the Mahabharat war. Okay. Karna is one of those warriors that the Pandavas cannot win. Okay. Without defeating him. Okay. First thing that happens, Bhim, who's also one of the Pandavas, his son Ghatotkach comes into the war. Ghatotkach is half demon, right? So he has all these magic powers and he creates havoc in the Kaurav army. So Duryodhan pushes and forces Karn to use his Shakti weapon, which he was holding for Arjun. He pushes him to use it on Ghatotkach. And Karn, out of respect for his friend, he does so. So that weapon is gone. It can only be used once. Okay? That weapon is gone. So part one of Karn's demise is there. Okay. On the ultimate battle between Arjuna and Karna, okay, they're fighting. And Karn decides to summon one of his divine weapons to destroy Arjun. I think it's the Brahmastra. But he cannot remember how to summon it. His mind is completely cloudy because of that curse. Okay?
From Parshuram.
From Parshuram.
Yes.
Then he's getting ready to move his chariot and the wheel gets stuck in the ground. So he steps off and he's trying to pull the wheel out of the earth and it's not coming out. And it's at that point that Krishna tells Arjun, look, you know, this is your chance. Kill Karna. Arjun says, but he's not armed. He's helpless. And Krishna says, look, how many rules did he follow? You know, he killed this person and he was involved in this. So why do you worry about it? So at that point, Arjun shot his arrow and he killed Karna. The second curse, the helpless part, came in play there. But this is a very long-winded way of showing how different actions that Karna took by intention and even not intention, how all of that, you know, led to something like this.
Right.
Which is incredible. And ultimately, you know, even though he recognized that he was on the wrong side, he stayed there. So what was the result going to be? You were going to lose
Right.
because you're on the wrong side of history.
Correct.
So, and there's just so many, I mean, I won't go into all of them, but there's just so many examples of this in the Mahabharata. I mean, if you look at the character of Bhishma, right, who pledges to never get married and never have any children of his own, technically, if you think about it, all the problems that happened in the Mahabharata is as a result of those
It's attributed
vows.
to that, right?
Yeah. So talk about,
Yeah.
terrible consequences of your actions. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that happens is a result of that. And I'll just real quick just mention, just like a running list, things like Princess Amba, who was one of 3 sisters who Bhishma took to marry his brother when she was already in love with someone else. That man refused to take her back when Bhishma sent her back. And so Bhishma couldn't marry her because of his vows. So she vowed to take revenge. And, because of that, she was born as Shikandi and was the cause of his death, right? Or Draupadi laughing at Duryodhan when he fell in the pool and she called him blind son of a blind father. I mean, and when his father was the blind King Dhritarashtra, I mean, that led to her insult in the dice game, right?
Right.
All these things, or even when I've talked about this, Krishna killed Shishupal and she instinctively took off a piece of her cloth and wrapped it on Lord Krishna's finger because he got cut, and he said, I will make sure that every string that you put on me will be protected. And that's what happened in the dice game. So Mahabharata is a trove of karma and the what results of that. So very fascinating.
Very fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to talk about one quickly from the Ramayan, the other epic. Maharaj Dashrath, who's the king of Ayodhya, right? He's the father of the Sri Rama, right? So the father of Sri Rama was a very pious king, right? Very, very good-natured man. And one mistake he made earlier in his life out of ignorance led to his death. And the story goes as such, that he was hunting in the forest and he had an arrow that was sound vibration activated, right? So when he shot the arrow, he thought it was going to go kill the animal that he thought was somewhere grazing in the pasture there. And the sound was actually being caused by a young man who was carrying his elderly parents, both blind, and he was literally carrying both his parents, and he was on the bank of a river there, and they were asking for water, and he had gone to collect that water to quench the thirst of his parents, and because of the sounds he was making, the arrow shot him and not any animal, right? And the king heard him screaming, and he said, and he was dumbfounded. He was like, "What happened?" He didn't totally expect that he would be killing any person, right? So when he heard the cry of pain, he went to that scene and he saw this young man who was right near the lake there, or the river, and he was dying in agony because of the arrow striking him in the heart. And he was saying, I'm an innocent person. I was just trying to get my old parents water. They're not able to walk or anything. So at the end of all of this, right, the parents, after he dies, the parents come to know that, so he brings, Maharaj Dashrath actually brings them the water and tries to feed it to them, and he's very guilty about what happened. And they, even though they're blind, they come to know just by touching him or by his presence, they realize it's not their son, and they're like, "Who are you? You seem like somebody, we were expecting our son to bring us the water. Who are you?" And he said, No, I'm so sorry. He was really, really trembling because of what had just happened. He killed the young son of that elderly couple. And ultimately, they cursed him and they said, because you killed basically our son was our caretaker, right? And because we no longer have that caretaker, our life is pretty much done, right? So both the husband and wife die right there. And before that, he curses him and says, "You also will die thinking about your son, and you'll basically have separation from your son, and you're going to die because of the pain of that. Okay? And to him was born Lord Vishnu in the form of Lord Rama. And just imagine this, Rama is God. Okay? So not only did he come to the earth and act out a human being's life and go to exile for 14 years and deal with all the pain and everything that comes with it, just smiling, saying that, oh, it's fine. If you're banishing me, it'll be an opportunity for me to gain something from it or something like that. So he was a guy who always had positive outlook, right? His father was a very pious person other than this one mistake. But this one mistake and the curse from the father of that son who died said that he was going to die because of separation from Rama, right? So even though I'm not telling you guys the whole story, if you know the story of the Ramayan, it basically goes to show that God, even if he's your own son, cannot interfere in the reaction to the karma that you have incurred. He could have saved his father from that type of death, right? He could have said, my dad will be fine. I'll make sure I brainwash him or change his heart and say, oh, I'll be fine for 14 years until my son comes back. No. He died in that anguish of his son leaving within just days after he left the kingdom. So the curse of that elderly person came true. So that's another example of a karma story there.
Right. And this really excites me, I guess, but there's three things that came to mind also when you said this. I'll mention quickly. So one is, not post, but during the Mahabharat war again, two very interesting things happen towards the end. One is that so during the dice game, when Draupadi was brought, the Pandav's wife, Duryodhana, the villain of Mahabharat, said, when she came, he told her to come and sit on his thigh, right? And to that, Bhim, one of the Pandavas, her husband, said that, for this insult, I'm going to break your thigh, right? Okay, flash forward to the Mahabharat war. Duryodhana is the only one standing, okay? His mother, Gandhari, who wears a blindfold on her eyes, she tells him to come to her completely nude because she has a power that she's been keeping in her eye for all this time, which she was saving for a moment like this. And I'll tell you what that is in a moment. But she tells him to come completely nude, okay? So he's on his way, and Lord Krishna sees him and says, where are you going nude? And he's like, well, I'm going to my mother. I'm going to my mother. And he's like, look, you're not a baby anymore. Like, sure, when you're a baby, you can be nude in front of your mother, but you're a full-grown adult. Why are you doing this? You can't do this. He plants the seed of doubt. So Duryodhana's like, okay, yeah, that's correct. So he goes and he gets some leaves and he covers himself in the bottom up till where his thighs are, okay? And he goes to see his mother. She takes the blindfold off, and this power emanates from her eyes, basically making Duryodhana's entire body of steel, except for the part that was covered. And what did I say the part that was covered was? The thigh. Who had pledged to break this thigh 12, 13 years earlier? Bhim. And the next day when they have their war, Duryodhana's not getting defeated, and during the fight, Bhim is reminded of his vow, and the one vulnerable part is the thigh, and he breaks it. So look at that, right?
Look at that.
That same night, Krishna goes to see Gandhari. She says, you are God. You could have stopped this war. You didn't. You let my entire family get wiped out. So I'm going to curse you that your entire race will be wiped out as well. So look, God can get cursed too, right? Yeah. So in his earthly form. And subsequently after the war, some of Krishna's sons, they hear about a guru that can predict the future. So they're like, oh, why don't one of us dress as a woman? And we will go and ask the guru what the gender of the child will be that the woman is going to have. So they go and they ask the guru that, and he's like, she has a mace that will destroy your entire race. They freak out, and a mace falls out from under the clothes, which was not there. So they get scared. What do we do? So they take it and they break it up, they grind it up, and all except one piece is broken. Okay. So the rest of the ashes go and they grow into like this type of grass. That one piece is in the water flowing. A fish swallows it. Okay. A hunter named Jetta, if I'm not mistaken, he catches the fish and he opens it up and he's like, "Oh, that's weird. There's this odd piece in here, but you know what? This will work well for one of my arrows when I go hunting." Okay? So he fashions it for his arrow. One day he's out and he thinks he sees some sort of deer behind some shrubbery. He takes that specific arrow and he shoots it. But you know what? It's Lord Krishna's foot.
Mm-hmm.
And he shoots it there. And that's basically the end of Lord Krishna's life. But look at how that trickles down. And that grass that grew from the ashes of that thing, eventually what happens is there's a lot of infighting. If you pick up a blade of that grass, it turns into a weapon. And that whole race extinguished each other by picking up those blades of grass and doing that.
Wow.
And then you talked about Dashrath and Shravan Kumar. I mean, similar with Kunti, right? She was married to Pandu and he accidentally killed Rishi Kindam and his wife, who were, romancing each other.
Yes.
And the Rishi cursed Pandu that, you killed me and my wife when we were romancing. So when you try to, have relations with your wives, you're going to die.
Physical intimacy. Yeah.
Physical intimacy. You're going to die. Yeah. But years earlier, Kunti had served Rishi Durvasa, a very angry guru. And of that blessing, he gave her a mantra that she could call any god and basically have a child.
Yeah.
And so because she can't have it with Pandu, that mantra years later comes in handy.
So that's where the Pandavas all came from.
That's where the Pandavas all came from. And even
blessings
Karna,
of all the demigods.
Yeah. So that's just...
it's interesting how through these stories what we realize is the cause and the effect are not different from each other, right? The cause of the king killing a son of ailing parents, ultimately for him to die ailing, thinking about his separation from his son, and some of the stories you alluded to, right? They're all in sort of similar in nature. If this is what you do to somebody else, the effect is going to come to you in a similar fashion. Same kind of context, if you will. So it's really amazing how this whole thing comes full circle. Law of karma. So thank you so much, Vikram, for sharing these wonderful stories. And so like last time, we had done a segment, which I'd like to call from this point on as Spiritual Spotlight. And we had done that on Swami Vivekananda. So today, Christiane is going to shed some light on a personality, one that you may not have expected. So Christiane, if you could take it away.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So as those of you who are in America or connected to America know, last Monday in the United States, we celebrated a federal holiday of President's Day. So I'm going to talk about George Washington and the special place he holds not only in American history and society as a whole, but within the American Jewish community in particular, and why this is so. So as a quick refresher, Washington was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War, and he led the colonial forces against Great Britain in that war. After the war, Washington helped shape the new government under the U.S. Constitution, and he was unanimously elected as the nation's first president. But he was not only the military leader of the American Revolution, he also embraced ideas that were revolutionary for his time. And for this, in the Jewish community, Washington is not a religious figure or a hero in a ritual sense, and there are no prayers, there are no holidays dedicated to him, yet he's esteemed in somewhat of a unique way because of events that happened in the year 1790. So this was 1 year into Washington's presidency, and he received a letter from a man named Moses Seixas, who was the warden of the Toro Synagogue of Newport, Rhode Island. And now Toro Synagogue is the oldest synagogue building in the United States. And in this letter, Moses Seixas gives to Washington, or writes to George Washington. Moses thanks the president for protecting religious liberty in this newly formed nation. And shortly thereafter, as a way of showing his gratitude, Washington visited the Toro Synagogue in Rhode Island, and he delivered a letter that he wrote to the congregation. It's a pretty short letter, but I'm not going to read all of it. But I think I'll read like the last 3 paragraphs, because some of these phrases in it are still somewhat recognizable and they've become famous, if you will. So it reads as follows. The citizens of the United States of America have a right to applaud themselves for having given to mankind examples of an enlarged and liberal policy, a policy worthy of imitation. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. It would be inconsistent with the frankness of my character not to avow that I am pleased with your favorable opinion of my administration and fervent wishes for my felicity. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way everlastingly happy. Signed, G. Washington. So it's hard to appreciate how bold and how radical these statements and promises were to the Jewish community. So you really have to have some understanding of the historical context during which Washington wrote. So this was a time in which the Jews of Europe were required by law to live in segregated walled ghettos. The ghetto gates were often locked at night. Jews were prohibited from owning land, from joining professional guilds, from serving in public office. They were frequently subject to special taxes. There were restrictions on Jewish marriage, movement, and residence, and their right to remain in a given place depended less on the law than on the goodwill of the rulers. So this left entire communities perpetually vulnerable to sudden expulsions or revocations of citizenship and rights and privileges. Many countries throughout history allowed Jews to live in it only by permission, and this permission could be revoked at any time. So although Enlightenment ideas were beginning to circulate throughout Europe at this time, full Jewish emancipation was extremely rare. France would not grant Jews equal citizenship until 1791. And in most of Europe, such rights would not arrive until decades later, if at all. So Washington framed Jewish belonging as permanent. Jews were no longer guests, subject to the conditions and whims of the ruling class. They were equal citizens and they were protected by law with full civil equality. Pluralism was not seen as a threat to the nation, but rather a defining feature of it. And this helped set the tone for America's identity as a pluralistic society. And also the First Amendment, which, the first phrase of it basically says that the government can't establish an official religion and it can't prevent you from practicing your own. So Washington also backed his language up with actions. He continued to correspond respectfully with Jewish leaders. He appointed Jews to public roles such as federal government positions as inspectors, commissioners, and agents. And in the military, he promoted, retained, and publicly honored Jews who served in the Continental Army. He never used religious language that excluded Jews from the national we, and he consistently spoke about conscience, liberty, and equality. He reinforced his words that being Jewish was not a barrier to full civic participation and advancement in society. So this letter continues to this day to be quoted in synagogue sermons, in Jewish school curricula, in museum exhibits, and public statements. At Toro Synagogue, it's regularly commemorated through public readings, interfaith gatherings, and visits by judges, presidents, and civic leaders. So reinforcing this idea that religious freedom is a shared American responsibility. And this framing has significantly shaped how Americans understand themselves and why religious diversity became a core element of the nation's identity. So subsequent presidents have invoked this letter when addressing minority faith communities, and courts and scholars have relied on it in interpreting religious liberty. So in this way, honoring Washington is less about reverence for the man himself and more about the principle that he articulated, which is that Jews, like all religious minorities, belong fully and unconditionally in American society. So for that, happy President's Day. And we remain very grateful to George Washington.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Christiane. Our gratitude to the soul that George Washington was, and to establish the type of government that where people have that freedom of religion and to be able to practice. That's wonderful. And in the sort of to connect with the theme of what we're talking about today, he's in one sense a karma yogi. One who, tries to implement very noble, way of government and also did a lot through his own actions. So, and, next time we look forward to continuing on with this, with the interesting topic of speaking more in depth about reincarnation and the afterlife and death. We hope Christiane will join us, but we're not 100% sure because she's about to go on a big expedition. Indian expedition.
Into incredible India. That's right. So if I miss next month, I'm sorry, but hopefully I'll make up for it with some good India information and stories and experiences.
Yeah, we wish you safe travels.
Thank you.
And enjoy yourself there.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Awesome. So I hope everyone gains some understanding of karma and karma yoga, some of these topics and these terms that we hear all the time. I hope and if there are any questions that you guys that come to mind based on what we spoke about, we'd love to answer these questions. So please send us an email, divinediscoveries108@gmail.com, or you can shoot me direct message through our Instagram page, Divine Discoveries 108. So we look forward to expanding on this in the next episode. But until then, may you all be well. Om Shanti.